Today, we're returning to TS Classic for yet another video about a product from Caledonia Works. Our subject is the Furness Railway A5 class, a little 040 tender engine that sits in stark contrast to big locomotives like the Linear A1/1 and absolute giants like the Pennsylvania Railroad S1. What this thing's doing on a British route is anyone's guess. Regular viewers should know the drill by now, but for those who don't, I have no commercial connections to any developer, and I bought the Furness A5 with my own money. The little Furness 040 was released for TS Classic in July 2021. 4 years later, she is still available on CW's website for £13, or around $28.28 NZD, at full price. Normally, the CW engines are modelled solely by Chris Wilson, but in the case of the A5, she was primarily modelled by Cam Scott of Darlington Works. And now for a brief history on the A5, based on information found in the manual. This was a class designed by Sharp Stewart and Company, and built between 1863 and 1866, with the intention being to use them for freight and shunting work on the Furness Railway. They were apparently good engines for their time, but due to the rapid growth in freight traffic, with which the A5s couldn't cope, 6 members of the class were sold into industrial service in the early 1870s. Numbers 27 and 28 were retained by the Furness Railway, who kept them in service until 1918. The other 6 engines were rebuilt as saddle tanks prior to entering industrial service. They were sold to the Barrow Hematite Steel Company, or BHSC for short, and worked at the huge steelworks in Barrow-in-Furness for many years. Incredibly, 2 of the ex-Furness engines were still in service as late as 1960, when they were finally replaced by diesel shunters. The 2 survivors were formerly numbered as 20 and 25 under the Furness, but instead of being scrapped, they were presented to local schools for static display after a staggering 97 years in service. In 1983, BHSC Locomotive No. 7, previously Furness No. 20, was sold into private ownership and moved to Steamtown in Carnforth for restoration, but that was cut short after the owner passed away. Later, in 1990, the dismantled locomotive was acquired by the Furness Railway Trust, who continued with the restoration. This involved the construction of an entirely new boiler and tender, and it wasn't until 1999 when No. 20 finally ran under her own steam again. These days, she's famous for being the oldest working steam locomotive in the UK, at 162 years old. As for what you get with the Caledonia Works pack, there isn't much, to be honest. You effectively only get one livery, namely Furness Railway Indian Red, in either clean or weathered states, plus a special preservation era version of No. 20. Due to an apparent lack of available works drawings, the saddle tank rebuilds are not included in the TS Classic pack. Looking around the model, we can see that Cam Scott and Chris Wilson have done a good job recreating these curious little locomotives. It's interesting to note the complete lack of an enclosed cab, although that sort of thing was commonplace on steam locomotives back in the day. Something else that I noticed was the steam dome being placed unusually close behind the chimney, instead of somewhere closer to the middle of the boiler. Meanwhile, we can see that the buffer beam is attached to the frame in a really bizarre way, but this does leave plenty of room to access and oil the cylinders. Unlike other CW products, such as the London and South Western Railway T14, the A5 doesn't have custom crew figures, and the ones she does use have been around in the game for many years. For all I know, they might even date back to the days of Kuju Rail Simulator, but I could be wrong. As far as I know, the Furness A5 is the second oldest locomotive in CW's range, with the oldest being the London and North Western Railway 222 number 3020 Cornwall of 1847. As for the newest, that's the British Railway's standard 4MT class 264 tank, which first appeared in 1951. The 4MT tank happens to be the only BR standard in CW's range. As for the sounds, these were mostly recorded from the preserved A5 number 20, apparently with help from Machine Rail, a developer whose name I recognise for their Baltimore and Ohio C16 and HK Porter locomotives, both of which happen to be 040 saddle tanks. However, some of the whistle sounds on the A5 sound borderline identical to those on the Steam Sounds Supreme enhancement pack for the Kuju era 7F. As is often the case with CW products, the Furness A5 doesn't come with any scenarios. However, she does have some quick drive consists, which require the Armstrong Powerhouse Mark I Coach Pack Volume 1 and the original version of the Caledonian Railway 422 No. 123, released in December 2017. Curiously, the consists do not appear to have been updated for compatibility with CW's newer version of Cali 123, released in January 2024. In any case, and as far as I know, there are no Furness Railway era routes available in TS, but at least there's a decent number of heritage lines available, on which the preservation era number 20 can run. As I was making notes for this review, I realised that you could also use the A5 on the Salisbury Mineral Tramway, made by Forths Games and Phoenix Developments. This is a freeware route set sometime between the 1850s and 1870s, I think, so this little 040 doesn't look too out of place here. According to the manual, the fire mass should be kept between 25 and 30%, while the water level should be kept between 70 and 90%. The percentages are marked on the F4 heads-up display, otherwise known as the Fisher-Price toolbar. As is often the case with post-2020 CW products, the Furness A5 features an advanced boiler heating system, so at the start of a scenario, it's best to sit idle and let the fire build up for a few minutes before setting off. It's interesting to note that the normal working boiler pressure is only 120 psi, and further advice on how to drive this locomotive can be found in the manual. As for any issues I noticed on the Furness A5, the only ones that come to mind was the builder's plate showing the same works number for every member of the class, and a glitch where the safety valve audio sometimes cuts out, even when you can see steam erupting from the safety valves. As for what the A5 is like to drive, I'd say she's fairly easy. to the point where she could be a good starter locomotive for anyone who's new to TS Classic. The engine steams reasonably well if you maintain the coal and water at the right levels, but she is by no means a speed demon. During my test run on the Esthwaite branch, I couldn't get her to go any faster than 33 miles per hour, although, to be fair, that's still a decent speed for a little 040 built in the 1860s. Although I know next to nothing about the Furness Railway, it would still be nice to see more locomotives and rolling stock from said company in TS, such as number 3 Old Copper Knob of 1846. As for the A5 class, personally speaking, I think this rendition we get from CW is pretty good, but it is a little bit pricey for what you get, and the locomotive has very limited uses outside of fictional routes or heritage lines. If you're interested in picking up this locomotive for yourself, I recommend watching out for a sale and buying her then. As it stands now, I think the dinky little Furness Railway A5 class deserves a 7 out of 10, and if you've stayed watching right through to the end, you win a new version of what I consider to be the best song ever recorded by Tony Basil, now rewritten to be about cosmetics. It's Over My Head and Shoulders.